spite of the rain, I am impressed, and you will not be disappointed. I said to Paul when I first came in that I couldn't think of a better way of bringing sunshine to a day like this than having him come and speak with us. We're going to play a DVD that is a documentary that was made by what you still is ARON, Channel 4. That is most heartwarming, and then afterwards you'll also get a chance to talk with Paul, and he's going to get a chance to talk with us. So, Joe, are you going to be my light person, or should we have someone else? Okay. Let them get it up first before you turn the light on. Okay?
1939 to 1948.
19 what?
1939 to 1948.
How many of you would like to? It's a nice place.
To eat what?
That's it.
It's not just chocolate.
Oh, well, that's
Also, just drink beer.
It's everything is lasagna now, but this is not what the so you have sound, but you don't have the
Schwarzbart sound is much awesomer than it was Jewish. Both were called Schwarzbart, started fighting for Austria in World War I. Now it's a different way. The Schrawzbart belongs to the The Nazi brown shirts were avenging the death.
Well, that's interesting. This may be interference.
No, that's not on. It's not working.
It's not what it was working before.
Yeah, I can do it. It's not working.
The whole thing is technology is great when it works. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, that's all that matters. So, what? I just saw one go up.
It's working?
Your mic.
Your mic?
Wait a minute. This mic is?
Yes.
You can hear it?
Yep.
Now you can hear it?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Can you hear it? That'd be in the commercial.
By the way, he's very shy.
Any burning questions?
Tell us how you got to Delta.
Well, maybe this thing will work, you know. I don't want to tell the whole story, you can get double doses.
So what have you done? What have you done since you came?
Oh, no, but I like the question, what brought you to the United States? And you know what my usual answer is? And sometimes they throw eggs and tomatoes. I say, shit. But seriously, you know, everybody always thinks only of planes. In 1948, I was glad to be able to catch a ship, let alone a plane, you know. It was a huge ship.
What's the name?
It was the SS Ronda, R-O-N-D-A, but I've forgotten that.
Were you in spirit?
But it really was. It was an enormous vessel. The passengers numbered 12. That gives you an idea of how huge it was. 6 cabins. Yeah. And it was well, the reason that we left when we did was because we finally got those papers, those blessed papers from the United States. We waited 3 years to get them. So when they came, we decided we're not wasting another minute. As soon as we can book passage, we're out of here. Well, the out of here happened to be the month of December. And crossing the Atlantic in December on the high seas, as they say in French, ain't recommended. You know, and some of you may have done it. This was necessity, we would have done it anyway. But given a choice, you do not want to get on board a ship in December to cross the Atlantic. It's the storm season. You know, when you have a little boat about this big, shooting up hundreds of feet of the waves and straight down, and then going up and then just dropping. And everything inside of you goes with it, you know. And, yeah, and I had, plus the smell of the mazout, that kind of oil that makes the ship go.
The diesel.
Yeah, that smell added to everything else. I had just survived a horrific war and seen hell. And yet, on that ship, I prayed for death. No joke. You know, I mean, the seasickness is so awful. I mean, it's just terrible. And the crossing, by the way, in case you probably wouldn't know anyway, 9 days. That's a long time. From Le Havre to New York. And I think the last day, the weather cleared. And then we came into harbor and we dropped anchor. And the movement in the harbor is very violent. And I got sick all over again. You know, I thought it was history, but it wasn't. Anyway, these are, you know, in retrospect, not, you know, it almost takes on a shade of funny, but not really. But at the time, not at all.
How did you get papers?
Oh, I'm supposed to tell you that. Did you hear the question? What did I do to get past everything and have them give me those papers anyway? I think the question is who sponsored me. Is that what you want to know?
Well, that's what happens, right? You have to have a sponsor.
Yeah. If you don't have a sponsor, by sponsor, I mean someone who's going to advertise, but someone who signs on the dotted line that he or she will be responsible for you until you can get on your feet, that you will never, ever be public charge of any sort. That you will be part
No
of.
prostitutes either.
No.
You have to sign that you will not engage in prostitution.
That's why it was so much fun, I never did. So you gave for a sign, I'll let you figure it out. Actually, that would have been a hell of a way up. You know, it's not that easy for guys. Some you don't. You ladies are
Moving on.
You've only found a topic we can have fun with. Any explanations needed? No, I never taught biology, but I might have.
What did you?
French.
You're not from Belgium, where are you from?
I'm from Austria.
Austria.
Can't you tell? I'm Viennese by birth. I have whipping cream running through my veins. The real stuff, you know, comes out of the can. Yeah, I wouldn't want that in my veins. Every time I bring up the idea of whipped cream, you know, my doctor used to be a cardiologist. He did not like the idea. You know, the creams. All the good things are bad for you. The good thing was that in those days, we didn't know that they were bad. You know, all this research hadn't been done. We used to engage in all these fun things which now tell us will kill us. Well, Let's see. So, what did I do after I got here? Well, it was an incredible experience landing here in December of 1948 because, well, the reasons are multiple, but certainly that America, at least in those days, was unlike anything any of us from outside America had ever experienced. I mean, it's difficult to describe because in the world in which we live today, everybody knows pretty much as much as there is to know about everybody else, at least if they're interested. Right? With television and the movies and everything else, you can really find out about a place. I had seen a couple of Nelson Eddy and Jeanette MacDonald movies. Wonderful. My idea of the United States was pretty weird. You know, I mean, walking onto Broadway and seeing no feathered Indians was a shock. You think I'm being weird or not? You know, the only real book I'd read about the United States was Gone with the Wind. So, you know, the Civil War was a long time ago. And it gives you, especially when you're 14, 15 years old, special ideas about a place. And I have to revise all that, which I did pretty quickly. Tell you, you know that I'm Jewish, of course, and in December on Broadway, the streets are covered with those little green trees, yeah? You know, and those jolly guys in the red suits. I've seen one of those before. The bells, very noisy bells, and heavy accents say, Hanukkah bushes! Hanukkah bushes! And I remember my mother looked at me and I looked at her, and we didn't know what the heck was going on. I said, Hanukkah bush. You know? So there were many, many adventures like that, cultural shocks, from which you survive, of course, but it takes a while. I remember when the headline said in the paper, and my English was less than tentative. The only practice I had of English that's the stage were two stewardesses on board the ship. And, you know, that's a great challenge for two good-looking Scandinavian women who either spoke their own language or English. Well, I mean, they do, right? Well, if you think I bet I couldn't use it everybody. Moving right along. And going back, one of the passengers in the sanctum, remember that movie? That radio program? You know, too young, but some of you remember. And it started with that door. One of the passengers was a young American woman. First one I've ever seen. First of all, she was about 17 feet tall. Very, very thin. Very nice. You know, and because there were only 12 passengers, we ate with the captain. And the crew, you know, there was one main table, so it was kind of formal in a way. And I'll never forget our first dinner. We all sat down, you know, 11 Europeans and that one American young woman. And out comes the main dish, and she picks up her fork, and she picks up her knife, and she cuts, and she puts down the knife, and moves the fork over, and eats. And I know the 11 of us look at one another and say, my God, it is a savage country. You know, after 61 years, I can visualize that table. You know, you're silly. What was I going for?
Are you okay?
Yeah. You're okay now?
Thanks, man.
Okay, so we can leave about an hour or so. Okay? And well, enjoy the process. Oh, come on.
Sound.
Joe?
escape and were brutally put to death or tortured. It is beyond imagination.
We, the German Chancellor and the British Prime Minister, have had a further meeting today. We regard the agreement signed last night as symbolic of the desire of our two peoples never to go to war with one another again.
I know that it happened. I know that I was involved in it. I know that I had to go into hiding to escape. I prayed very hard for my parents, my mother and my father, the teachers and the other children. I prayed that none of us would have to die or be hurt before it was over.
World War II and Europe was filled with rage and madness and killing. But in the Ardennes forest of Belgium, there was a place of refuge. Tucked away in the small village of Gemoigne was the children's home of Queen Elizabeth. Here, sanctuary was offered to 83 Jewish boys. Sanctuary from the persecution of Adolf Hitler's Nazi Germany and the evil of the final solution. Four decades later, in the spring of this year, the children returned to a reunion. Men in midlife with their families and friends to greet and embrace each other and the people who were their saviors. This is the story of one of the children who was saved, Paul Schwarzbart of San Rafael, California. Teacher, father, Jew, survivor. All that he is was shaped by what happened 50 years ago to a frightened little boy when hell opened up and claimed him. March 13th, 1938, Vienna, once the capital of an empire of kings and queens. This historic city is now the center of the Anschluss, the Nazi annexation of Austria, and where Adolf Hitler returns in triumph to the land of his birth. It was here as a young man that he suffered humiliation and failure as a would-be artist, and where he began to nurse his hatred for the Jews. It is also 1 month before the 5th birthday of Paul Schwarzbart, the only child of Friedrich and Sarah Schwarzbart. Austria is the land of their birth and a Jewish family heritage which dates to the 1700s. They have prospered in a country where 200,000 Jews not only made their home, but helped to define the culture. The Schwarzbart family is as much Austrian as it was Jewish. Both of Paul's grandfathers died fighting for Austria in World War I. Now, if Hitler can have his way, the 1,000-year tradition of Austria's Jews is to be obliterated from history, from memory.
One morning, my parents were standing at the window looking rather shook up. And I remember going to the window, looking out and seeing a strange, huge flag, a red flag with a white circle and a strange-looking cross in the middle. So overnight, the Austrian flag had been taken down and the Nazi German flag had been put up with a swastika. And this is how quickly it happened.
In Austria's new Nazi regime, the Jew is an enemy of the state. Paul's father had his job taken away, and the family apartment was confiscated and given to a Nazi family. Austria, the land of Strauss and the wolves, is now a land of violence and intimidation, even for children.
Children I'd grown up with, good friends, all of a sudden were wearing the button with a swastika and their lapels and telling me dirty little Jew to get off the sidewalk and walk in the gutter where I belonged.
The sound of breaking glass gave the name to the night of November 9th and 10th, 1938, Crystal Night, a rampage of terror and destruction directed against the Jews in every corner of Germany and Austria. The Nazi brown shirts were avenging the death of a German diplomat killed by a Jew. When the rampage had ended, the cold November sun revealed over 7,000 Jewish homes and businesses plundered, 300 synagogues put to the torch, close to 100 Jews killed, and 20,000 arrested and deported to concentration camps. In the last days of 1938, as many Jews before them were forced to do, the Schwarzbarts and other family relatives fled their homes. Leaving behind everything they once cherished, they left Austria forever. In late winter of 1938, the Schwarzbart smuggled themselves out of Austria through Germany and into Belgium. They are in search of visas to the United States. They find a small apartment in Brussels. It's a Jewish neighborhood. Life is hard.
I remember next door there was a woman who sold, down below next door, she sold coal and vegetables. And occasionally she would sell my mother some rutabaga or potatoes or sometimes the leftovers from it, whatever my mother could afford to pay for, but she always managed to cook it. I have disliked rutabaga ever since. I don't think I want to look another one in the face, but it kept us alive.
Again and again, Paul's father calls on the American embassy, but the visas never seem to come. Refugees are not able to obtain work permits, but Paul's mother finds illegal work as a housekeeper. As a result, Paul and his father spend many days together. Neither would know just how precious their time together would be. World War II begins in September of 1939. Poland is invaded, and as Hitler's armies rage on, the young boy and his parents in Brussels try as best they can to lead normal lives. The closeness between a father and son grows stronger.
I remember an enormous love for me, and which I returned. I remember an enormous love for my mother, which set a marvelous example for me both as husband and father. And this is really what is foremost in my memory.
Now, almost a half-century later, in the same Brussels neighborhood, other memories of a past filled with joy and regret are resurrected. The family home in the corner apartment building. Paul, now 55, has not entered this place since his childhood days.
The little apartment that we rented in 39, it was a walk-up on the 3rd floor. I feel like an intruder, you know. Okay, here's the 3rd floor. This was it. Looks unoccupied. This was our kitchen. This was our bedroom. It looks unoccupied. Looks like a storage space. Is that really how small it was? This door that either did not exist, don't remember. If it did exist, it was not one that opened, because this is all there was. My bed was here. There was a stove here. My mother's bed was right here. I always thought it was a large room. It's not a large room. This was our little kitchen. My God, it's small. stove stood right here. There was, of course, no sink, no water connection. We had to get in the toilet to get the water. There was a large table there. My mother had made curtains for it, so that was a storage space underneath. There were no cupboards of any sort. And that's all. That was the kitchen. Good times up here. Yeah. Wonderful family time up here. I never knew it was small or that we were poor or anything like that. Never really felt that. Good times. Long love. Much to be happy.
In the same September month of the Nazi blitzkrieg into Poland, Paul Schwarzbart begins the first grade. He is 6 years old.
This is the school where I met Joseph Campé. Wonderful man, my first year teacher. He really taught me French. And then when the Germans said that Jews could no longer go to school, he retired. He would not, if he couldn't teach everyone, he wouldn't teach. Every morning on his way to school, he would drop off a pack of sandwiches for me at the house. So I would eat lunch. And so I would eat. And he did that every day. Just a stranger, my teacher. This was a good place. Still looks like a good place. Kids learning. The journey in time, I think, is the most difficult one to make. Also the most meaningful one.
Friday, May the 10th, 1940. The German armies invade Holland, Luxembourg, and Belgium. Disregarding the 3-year-old pact of neutrality, Hitler's swift attacking infantry and panzer divisions overwhelmed the Belgians. On the same day their country is invaded, Belgian authorities begin a roundup of German-speaking refugees. They are seen as potential spies, possible Nazi collaborators. Tragically ironic, most are Jews running from the Nazis. In the roundup, which lasts 3 days, upwards of 10,000 are seized. Paul's father is among them.
Well, we were on the 3rd floor and in our bedroom, and someone knocked at the door, and uniformed Belgian police with white helmets and civilian, and they had papers, and they asked for Friedrich Schwarzbart, and they said that because of the war situation, he, being Austrian, he had to accompany them. It was very simple. It was not unfriendly. It was very matter of fact. And my mother was beside herself. I didn't know what to do, and they said that we could come down to the police station and bring some things to him. And off they went. This is what they brought the people on the 10th of May, the Germans, the Austrians, all the people of German origin, most of whom were Jews, but they didn't care. They stuck them in here, and then they were locked up in this tiny little courtyard, bunches at a time. I still see them all standing there, huddled together. everybody trying to be optimistic and wishing their wives or whomever, well, they'd be all right. And so my mother and I brought a bundle of clothes here and got it through the real work, and this is the last place I saw my father. Yeah, right behind us here, just sticking his hand out, reaching for us. It's a dismal place. It's dismal then, it's even worse now. He told me to take good care of my mother, that he would be back, but that I was the man of the family now and that I had to take care of Muti. And neither one of us knew that this was the last time.
The very day of his father's arrest, on the way home from their goodbye, Paul and his mother meet a woman whose family would become their Good Samaritan.
My mother went into a Red Cross station to find out if there was anything else we could do for my father, if we could find out where he was being sent and so forth. And as fate will have it, we spoke to a woman named Ives. I think she just reacted to the way my mother and I looked. And took pity on us, and I mean, as a human being in need of solace and help, and she willingly extended her hand.
Andre Eckstein, realizing the Schwarzbarts are alone and destitute, offers Paul's mother a job working in the Eckstein home, taking care of their children. The husband, George, is an architect. For the next 3 years, Paul spends a great deal of time in their house, and a relationship develops into something much deeper.
They were not Jews, these people who helped us were not Jews, which allowed them a certain amount of freedom that we didn't have, but also linked them very closely with us, and they would have certainly shared our fate if anything had happened to us.
Belgium surrenders 3 weeks after the Nazi invasion, and life with the country's 90,000 Jews becomes even more uncertain and dangerous. In the apartment next to the Schwarzbarts lives a woman who entertains the troops.
Which in this case meant Germans and even SS in their black uniforms. And which scared my mother very, very much. And yet we lived with it. I remember sometimes at night, she would, the walls were rather thin, and she would put her hands over my ears to protect my innocence.
Then come the letters written by Paul's father. He is in the mountains of southwest France at labor camps where the Belgian authorities have sent him.
Darling, give special kisses to my child.
The first letter is dated June 26, 1940, soon after France falls to the Germans. More letters follow, and the family writes back. The Germans censor the letters, but let them go through as proof of their so-called humanity. What survives are Friedrich Schwarzbart's expressions of hope and love for his family. This is what he writes Paul.
You are my everything, my sunshine, as well as your mother's, and the whole family's. I'd like to hold you fast, to love you. Tell jokes with you, but also unfortunately that is not possible because I'm here. But your picture I carry in my heart, and my thoughts are ever with you.
And there are words of love from husband to wife, words of love between a man and a woman.
It's a poem you wrote, my mother, on the occasion of their 10th wedding anniversary, October 25th, 1941. Around me, woods and meadows, and lush green mountains, morning in the sunlight. Everything so peaceful. And then God's wonder. And yet, much, much more beautiful than all of this are you. I should so much like to love you, kiss your eyes, your hands, your mouth so red, and find it so bitter to have to miss being near you.
By the summer of 1942, the Nazis are after every Jew in Belgium. At first, a deportation quota of 10,000 is established. Jews are told they are needed for work in the East. But then come the street arrests and roundups. Sent to transit camps, the Jews are often beaten and tortured. Finally, the train ride to Auschwitz. The first group of Jews leaves on September 2nd. Within a month, all 10,000 are deported. For 2 years, Paul's father suffers in the labor camps of France, where 3,000 prisoners die from brutality, starvation, and disease. Stopping short of extermination, the cruelty of the collaborating Vichy government comes close to that of the Nazis. In August of 1942, even that fragile distinction ends. At Germany's demand, the French hand over the remaining prisoners for deportation to the death camps in the East.
August 24th, 1942. Dearest city, dearest Parnica, I find myself going through the train station in Lyon and take the opportunity to send you my warmest greetings and kisses and utmost love. At the first possibility, I shall immediately write again. Stay in good health. God will help. With all my love, your Papa Fritz.
Paul's father never writes again. His 99th letter is his last. There are no letters from his next destination, Gross Rosen, or the one after that, Buchenwald.
My mother often wondered why nothing happened to us, but I think that she simply accepted it. That's really how life was in those days. The person next to you was arrested and you kept on walking. Someone on the street was shot and you were not. And one was just grateful to be alive no matter how tough it was. And of course it started to get tough really in 42 and 43, and that's when the underground approached my mother and asked her whether she wanted to save my life, which was an interesting question to ask her mother. And if she did want to save my life, she'd have to simply give me up.
Paul's mother, now seeing the Nazis are rounding up old people and children, talks to the Ecksteins about the choice she must make. When the stranger from the underground returns that night, she has her answer.
When she was handed that lifeline for me, I think she grabbed it. It seems to me that she had been probably agonizing over the problem of finding a solution of what to do with me, how to save me.
Paul is to leave this night. The Ecksteins offer him the use of their family name. The destination is secret. Not even his mother is told.
And she got a bundle of clothes together for me. Some good shoes, and some warm underwear. And the man came, and she said yes. And we kissed goodbye. And it wasn't quite so simple, but... And off I went into the night with this man holding me by the hand. And he took me to the train station, the Luxembourg, and he put me on a train and told me where I was going, and told me to take care of myself, which meant, remember, you're not Jewish. And then he walked away and I never saw him again. And a few hours later I ended up in India then, a little village of Jamwania.
It is May 13th, 1943. Paul Schwarzbart, now Paul Eckstein, does not know whether he will ever see his mother again. He is 10 years old.
And now that I am a father, I'm beginning to understand what she must have gone through to say yes to letting the son walk away in the night, not knowing whether she would ever see him again. It must have torn her heart out.
Gotta go, Dad.
When a loved one has to be left at home without care,
Bye, Grandpa.
life becomes empty.
Love you, Pop.
At Adult Day Health Centers, medical care is just the beginning. We also offer personalized therapy, and each weekday, we brighten lives with the best medicine of all, the joy of being with friends. If you know someone we can help, call us today. Brighten someone's life.
Do you think you could be a guide dog without going upstairs?
Moselle Zimmer volunteers by helping puppies become guide dogs for the blind. It really doesn't take much to make a difference. Just a few hours of your time can mean so much. If you want to show you care, become a volunteer and find out how good it feels. Call your local volunteer center at 800-CARE-123. That's what a friend is for.
Tom Waddell competed in the 1968 Mexico Olympics. He came home one of the 6 best athletes in the world. He was also a physician. And even when competing overseas, he took time to care for the sick. In 1982, he founded the Gay Games to fight the cliches of both athlete and homosexual. He married Sarah Lewinstein and had a daughter, Jessica. And finally, even as the disease attacked him, he tried to teach us about AIDS. Through the United Way's AIDS Crisis Fund, the Shanti Project, the San Francisco AIDS Foundation, and others can continue Tom's teaching and help those who have AIDS live and die with dignity. AIDS destroys the best among us, the doctor, soldier, athlete, and father. In Tom Waddell's case, it killed them all in one.
River, Jemwania is a farming village of about 1,000 people during World War II. And it is during the war that this 19th century chateau becomes a shelter for the needy children of Belgian soldiers. Named for the Queen Mother of Belgium, Queen Elizabeth, the chateau now becomes a place of secret refuge for Jewish children, a special place in the life of 10-year-old Paul Schwarzbart.
I arrived in Jemwania in the morning and then I was picked up. I hadn't thought about that for years.
The Jewish boys aged 5 to 14 began arriving in March of 1943. They are overseen by 30 teachers and monitors and by a handful of nuns from the Order of the Sisters of Charity.
In the morning, we would be having classes with these various teachers who would try to maintain our education. And in the afternoon, we played. We went out in the woods as scouts, and we built our huts, and we had our scouting games.
They all learn about getting along, about living with other human beings. Paul becomes a Cub Scout leader.
There I was, proud as can be, probably the shortest among them. Along with Paul Joris, my mentor, and walking almost side by side with him, I remember always gave me such a good and proud feeling.
With Paul's father lost to him, 23-year-old teacher Paul Joris becomes one of the most important people in young Paul's life.
He said that when I arrived there, I seemed lost and very sad, and he talked to me, and it just clicked. And that one person extending his hand to me, I think made all the difference. it made some of the loneliness disappear, some of the fear. I have an enormous love for that man.
The home is administered by Emile Taquet, a retired Belgian army officer, and his wife Marie, a couple with no children of their own.
Every night she would tuck every and each boy in his bed and kiss him goodnight. And I remember how we waited for Maman Taquet to come out. We wouldn't go to sleep if she were detained until she had kissed us goodnight.
Though the chateau is in a remote corner of the Ardennes forest, German troops are a constant threat. Other safe houses in Belgium are discovered, and their children and benefactors arrested and sent to death camps. One early morning in July of 1943, truckloads of Nazis with machine guns pull up to the chateau and began to search its rooms and hallways.
I was so frightened that I wet my bed. We were on thin straw cots. This went right through and dripped onto the floor, where it was audible. And I remember two of the German soldiers hearing it and looking under the bed, and then one laughing in the other and saying, this kid just peed in his pants. And they thought very good-naturedly, this was very funny. All they had to do was throw back the covers and it would have been the end of fun.
One of the monitors, the one nicknamed Mouton, is taken away, presumably to his death. But by some unexplained miracle, the boys are spared. Hiding at the chateau means that Paul must take on a Catholic identity. All the Jewish boys do. Paul is baptized. He takes Holy Communion. He even becomes an altar boy.
And believe it or not, I was a very good altar boy, because this was not an act for me. For any of us, I think. We lived what we did. And the Our Father and the Hail Mary were learned, in one session as I listened to everyone repeating it, because we had to utter these prayers constantly. We had to say grace. And I became a very good Catholic, which I suppose is being a good Jew, since Jesus was a Jew.
As the months pass into next year, Paul falls into a routine that offers some semblance of tranquility. The home becomes a place of beauty and warmth.
And there is nothing in these walls associated with sadness, whatever may have torn us up inside, have nothing to do with this place. And so as I look at these walls, I just feel peaceful.
The landing was made this morning on the coast of France by troops of the Allied Expeditionary Force. The hour of their liberation was approaching.
By September of 1944, the Allies are in the process of pushing the Germans to their own borders. On the afternoon of the 8th, soldiers from the American 28th Infantry Division encountered German troops in Chamoigny. The skirmish extends to the grounds of the chateau.
And there, my friends and I stood out there with bullets literally whistling by and shells exploding, too dumb to take shelter, not really caring about it. And I think even the teachers, the monitors, were just as much in awe of what was happening and were watching with us and forgot to tell us to get back in. And here came the jeeps with their antennas, which we thought were fishing poles, and the boys got out and stood out in the open, shooting back.
By late afternoon, the encounter is over. Americans move the Germans into further retreat. The village of Chamoigny is liberated. So is the children's home of Queen Elizabeth. All 83 Jewish boys survive.
For what it did for us, it was an immense fortress. A refuge, a place of learning, a place to grow up.
Now 11 and a half, Paul receives permission from Madame Taquet to leave the chateau. On October 30th, he says goodbye, and with Pope, his only companion, sets out for the old Brussels neighborhood in search of his mother.
She always said that she did not want to give up this apartment because that was the one place where my father knew that he could find her, and I too, after I went away, I would come back to that. And that's why she said she stayed, but she lived in fear throughout the war every minute.
On a familiar street, hope becomes reality. After almost 2 years, Paul finds once again the soft embrace of his mother.
When I saw my mother at a distance, I recognized her, of course, immediately, and she, me, and we start running toward each other, almost like in a movie. And I was calling out Mutti, which is what I called her. And one of the first things I said to her was, "Oh God," in broken German, "I was so homesick for you." And we just hugged. One of the things she said to me was that, now we can wait for Papa's return together. And so we started waiting and inquiring, filling out forms, trying to find out where he was and when he would be coming home.
There is an epilogue to the story of Friedrich Schwarzbart, and it is found here in the Brussels office of the Belgian Ministry of Justice. In a series of rooms, Nazi records, row upon row, detail ledgers, the cold arithmetic of life and death.
These are all the Jews who were deported out of Belgium.
Paul comes here out of curiosity, looking for his personal history in the code books of the underground. But records keeper Claire Beret helps him discover other information. Since 1960, Paul has known for certain that his father is dead, but it is only here and now that he learns how he died.
Yes, here's my father. He entered Buchenwald on the 10th of February 45, coming from the camp of Grossrosen, with his number, 124951, and then he died there 1 week or 8 days later. It says died. I always wonder why they don't say murdered. This is so chilling that there are just no words for it. I know all these things exist, but to see your own father's life, little slips of paper from German registers, has all the information. It's incredible. Oh my God. That's how I remember him. Todes Marche, dear Lord, he was part of the death march. Perhaps it says that both his feet were frozen, and perhaps that sepsis means that he developed blood poisoning or something.
The cold arithmetic of life and death. Friedrich Schwarzbart, tattoo number 124951, died of blood poisoning at 5:30 on a Sunday morning. It was February the 18th, 1945, less than 2 months before the camp's liberation. He was 42 years old.
Is there ever a time when I don't think about my father? No, there really isn't. I think about him very, very, very often. He's always with me. This was a big battlefield.
More than 4 decades later, the chateau is alive with familiar voices again.
Oh, God.
Paul and the others have returned to remember.
I've come a long way for this.
On this warm Sunday afternoon in the Ardennes, they've come from their homes across Europe and America. With loved ones, 44 of the boys returned for a reunion. For many, including Paul, it is the first time they've seen each other since their childhood days.
These are human beings that, even though we had not seen, for the most part, one another for 45 years, we walk up and time means absolutely nothing. You embrace one another, you kiss, and the glow is so profound and so special.
His beloved teacher, Paul Joris, is here. Now 67 years old, he is a professor in Brussels.
Oh, fine. Oui, il est en train de prendre.
Madame Taquet, now 87, and a widow. And here's Mouton, the monitor who was taken away by the Nazis. The boys all thought he was killed, but he is alive, and he is here. They all return to see each other and hear words that acknowledge the purpose of this day, words that bring back those years of sacrifice and fear and death.
C'est à travers les mains de ces filets que la résistance belle.
David Inaloki, who organized the reunion, entered the chateau on his 5th birthday. He says returning today is like finding a family he had lost.
And there's no border, no difference between those boys. They are all the same. Little boys saved. They have grown up now.
One of the people who saved the little boys is 66-year-old Andrei Herskovici. A Brussels school teacher in 1942, she became alarmed as her Jewish pupils vanished one by one during the Nazi deportations.
Je ne me rendais pas compte, au départ, je ne me rendais pas compte pourquoi.
I would ask why they were missing, and they told me they were taken away last night by the Germans. They went to a camp. And then I told myself it was impossible. We cannot stay like this doing nothing.
Others shared her feelings. In the same year, the Jewish Defense Committee was established to save Jews from extermination. The committee contacted authorities in the Belgian government who were sympathetic. They agreed to help provide secret havens like the Children's Home of Queen Elizabeth. Andre joined the effort and through the Belgian underground began the dangerous job of shepherding children.
And it was very dramatic when I left with a child and the mothers were begging me and kissing me and were asking me, tell me where the child is going to go. And I said, no. Afterwards, when I was in the street, I cried. But at the time it was hard for the mothers, and many of these mothers never saw their children again. That's what you should know.
The children of Jemoigna on this day also came to honor those who helped save them. They are called righteous Gentiles, non-Jews, who saved Jews during the war. Israel's ambassador to Belgium presents diplomas and medals to 31 adults who saved the 83 Jewish boys from the Nazis. Madame Taquet is among those honored.
Je vous félicite au nom de toute l'amitié. Moi, je vous embrasse.
Paul Joris is also recognized. The man young Paul so admired and respected that he too became a teacher. After the ceremony, mentor and student talk about the past.
Paul remembers when I arrived in Jemoigna.
With new shoes. You had new shoes and it was very difficult for you to walk. Do you remember?
I remember that because, you know, Mommy had to equip me for going away forever.
Yes.
So I had good shoes on. We became good friends. Yes. And then you became my godfather. In the true sense of the word.
He was not a rational boy. I had some pupils in my classroom who were very clever too, but who only worked with their heads. And Paul had also a very big heart. You understand what I mean? What that was Paul. And because he had a very big heart, his eyes reflected what happened in his heart and in his body.
On the way to the banquet, Paul met another dear old friend, 73-year-old Father René Ardet, the priest who made Paul an altar boy.
He was our father with a capital F, and he taught us catechism, and he taught us about values, and he taught us about dignity and how to become a human being that matters.
Father Ardet, now with cancer, was advised by doctors not to attend the reunion. But he came, he says, because doctors don't always understand about God. At the final event of the day, 250 people gathered for an afternoon of informal celebration. Here in the church banquet hall, they'll share food and drink and complete their renewal with the past. They sing to remember the love of the grown-ups who saved them and the comradeship of the other boys. They sing to declare their own survival. They sing to forget what they can never reclaim, the dreams that were shattered on the night of the broken glass. They sing to celebrate one small, undeniable, and particular triumph of good over evil, a conspiracy of love between men, women, and children with two faiths, but one God.
It was a Christian prayer, and we sang this, thanking the Lord to give us food for that particular day. Yes, and we were thankful. It was a Christian prayer, that's all.
Nous aimerions porter un toast à la santé de Madame Taquet.
A renewal of the past. In this hall, Madame Taquet is surrounded by people she cared for and loved so many years ago. In all, she was responsible for 125 Christian and Jewish children. As a family, it had its normal problems. When the children arrived, they brought very little with them. So Madame Taquet had to make certain there was enough food, clothes, proper instruction. There was not much time to always worry about the Germans. Of Paul, she remembers a young boy who was well-mannered and educated. Madame Taquet and her husband called him the Little Prince. She had great affection for him.
Sometimes I say to myself when I look at you, if the outcome had permitted, you would have been my child. You had nothing to worry about. Nothing would have happened to you.
A renewal of the past. Men who have become doctors, artists, businessmen, husbands and fathers, stand together on the stage and declare with great pride their names. The real names they were forbidden to say while they were in hiding here.
Je m'appelais Paul Extin.
And Paul pays tribute to the family whose name he borrowed. Andre and George Extin are dead, but their 3 children remain close to Paul.
My feelings for all of them are total love and respect. They are indeed all members of my family in the deepest sense of the word.
As the hours grow short, they look to exchange a few more pictures, memories, details, to discover and to show how it all turned out. As though the past was close by, this afternoon of reunion allowed each of them to reaffirm the human capacity for love.
I still love my children the way I loved them at the time. Does a mother ever forget her children? I had adopted these children, and I kept this affection for them. And I would do for them now what I did back then.
I was at the same time very happy to see all that people, and at the same time I was a little sad because it's past is no more. Past is no more.
Little by little it became more and more emotional, and after a little while it was almost overwhelming. Because all the memories of those days and I kept seeing all of us as kids again. All for one and one for all.
So for one day they've been together again, and now that day is coming to a close. They tell each other, we must meet again. And on this one day, they have celebrated together what they have celebrated apart for the past 4 decades, their own survival. They have returned to the place and the people where that survival was secured. They have shown what they have made of that gift they were given here. A journey begun in fear and completed in triumph.
It's wonderful to be alive. It's wonderful to be alive.
Adolf Hitler's dream of a 1,000-year Reich ended in 12 years. Of the 6 million Jews who were murdered, 1.5 million were children. 15 of Paul's relatives were exterminated by the Nazis. Fulfilling a legacy offered in his youth, Paul has been a teacher for 32 years. He is also a proud husband and father. His wife Gail is a concert violinist, and they are the parents of 2 sons, Mark 14 and David 13. A close, nurturing family, they continue the religion of his ancestors. In 1969, having remained faithful to her husband, Sarah Schwarzbart died.
Everything that we saw in the film, where I appeared, was a one-take deal. The film with no preparation, and Ken simply shot it as it was happening. For instance, the visit to the apartment. I had been back to that building numerous times. It never crossed the threshold. And looked at the building, looked out, and I went on. And that time, Ken simply said, he was standing with his camera, he said, okay, now you've seen it, now go in. And he pushed me through the door and up the stairs. And when you saw me saying, I feel like an intruder and pushing that door, that's really how it happened. It just happened to be a vacant apartment. That's how I was able to see it. On the way down, a real burly-looking guy comes up the stairs, big black mustache. It turned out to be a Turk. And really, and very, very friendly. I explained to him while we were there. He said, "Did you see what I put in the water in that room?" No, he just ran up a counter right across the wall. I said there was no water. So that's how Ken did it. When we came back to the United States, we had, I think, 30 hours of film, and they spent from May until November editing on Van Ness there, and they brought it down to 52 minutes, which is remarkable. That the station would expend that kind of energy and capital for this film. The station, I forget his name, the manager called me before it was put on the air. And he said, we think this film is so important that we refuse to commercialize it. We will not sell it. But do you give us permission to run public service announcements? Which you saw. And I said, of course. He did it very, very tastefully, I thought. Did you recognize some of these actors who were, they were young, every time I see Sam, is it Wharton, Sam from, Watson from Law and Order, Harry Weston, so that was really fascinating to see what they did with it. The film received 3 Emmys. I think deservedly so. And the award ceremony was at the Kabuki Theater. And they dragged me, you know, I was there, they dragged me on stage with them, and when we got their award for the best documentary of the year in that field, they accepted it and then handed it to me. You know, I mean, that was very, very moving and unexpected. Bob Jimenez, who was the anchor of Channel 14, invited my wife and me to his house for dinner, and he opened up the closet, and there stood the Emmy. He said, "I owe this to you." He's a very wonderful, humble people. He didn't owe it to me. You know, he earned it. It was such a lovely thing for him to say. And I'm glad that you saw Sons and my wife briefly at the end of the film. The film was made in 1988. So I was 22 years younger. Hair was darker and shorter. Yeah, Mark, the oldest there, is now, he just turned 36 a few days ago, the day after Valentine's. And the young kid, his brother, is turning 35 in 3 months. He's a naval officer, U.S. Navy. He's on a submarine, nuclear engineer. Congratulations. Their mother, my dear wife Gail, was violinist for the San Francisco Symphony, died in 1996 at the age of 55. And my life was over, except my sons kept telling me, "You're so young, you have to live, because money is not coming back." Then I met Sherry, and she brought me back to life. This is our 10th year. Okay, I think that brings us up to date, and I'm at your disposal for not doing this week.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
How did your mother survive the war staying in Brussels when they had rounded up the Jews?
Did you hear it? It's a question which is almost always asked. And, you know, I spoke to that a little bit in the film when I said she stayed in her apartment because she felt duty-bound to be in a place where my father and I would know where to find her. The house next door was empty. The house across the street was empty. And diagonally, it was right by the school where you saw my first school, that was completely empty. In our building, you're looking for a reason? I can't give you one. I've thought about it a lot, as you would imagine. After 61 years here, and thinking about it now, lecturing and film questions like that come up, but I've thought about it on my own. One possible, if you're looking for something non-miraculous and something rational in an irrational situation, is that because of that lady of the night who lived next door and was entertaining officers and troops all the time, perhaps the building was off limits. You know, I'm making a possibility. My mother told me that one day she was going down or up, and there was a German officer going. She was going up and he was going down. So he had already been. He was obviously in a pretty good mood. That's why I remember which direction it was. And, you know, and she said, of course, she saw him, and she was wearing a star. You know, you have to wear a big star. And he kind of bowed to her and said, "Gnädige Frau," and went on his way. For those of you who don't speak German, gnädige Frau means a lady full of grace, because that's part of the AON. You know? So a very genteel, respectful greeting in German. You knew that she spoke German. I think you wouldn't have said that otherwise. And that was it. And she said she lost a few years of life. She said, you know. Another time when I was still living with her, she received a letter from the Gestapo headquarters in Brussels, addressed to her not as Mrs. Schwarzbart, but as City Schwarzbart. Her name was Sarah, as you heard, and City is the Austrian nickname for Sarah. It just occurred to me, I think a few months ago, there were all these years of years that, you know, the nickname here in America is City for Sarah. You just learned some words. So the letter was addressed to City Schwarzbart, by her nickname, and telling her she had to appear. And she went, because not obeying was possibly worse than obeying. And she came back and, you know, she was white as your blouse. She was there most of the day. You know, we were corresponding with my father. And he was in the free French zone, which was under German rule. And she was called there 99 letters. She called her for one letter. They said she was corresponding with enemy territory. You know, I mean, sheer harassment. And they imposed a fine for that, which was astronomical. And something that we never could have taken. My little mother, that wonderful lady with so much guts, appealed the decision. She appealed, you know. Can you imagine appealing to the monster? I can't face it, it's too much. I had the letter. They reduced it to an amount she could pay. But she did. You know, there are details here that would make your hair curl or uncurl. Because of its banality, if you will. And yet it meant life again. And I think maybe that's the worst thing, that life and death was so banal. You know, I remember the street cop, an old man said that, to be political, addressed a young kid who was wearing the black uniform of the Belgian collaborators, English or whatever. He said something to him, "Aren't you ashamed of your own country?" And the kid pulled out his pistol and shot him down. You know, and what did we all do? As soon as the street got stopped, we ran, because we knew that as soon as the Germans and the police came, anybody there would be arrested. But I mean, that's how this man's life ended. Just like that, some dumb kid with a gun. Still happening, right? So I could go on and on, but I really should answer your question, because that's what you want. So please. Yes.
Do you know how you came to be one of those that was selected to go to the children's school? Like how, if that was pure luck, or if there was some way that your mother learned about that?
Everybody understood why was I selected to go into hiding by this group of young people. Sheer luck. The word of mouth, they tried to find out where the Jewish kids were. And, you know, this was a handful of young people, men and women. My best recollection of the young men who came to the house, because I never saw them again after that, was, you know, either very late teens or very early 20s. So young, you know, and they were all like that. And this little handful of kids, of men and women, who said, no, we have to do something, hid 3,000 kids. And the statistic is that of the 3,000, 3,000 survived. Not like anybody ever thought. You know, they started by saying no by themselves and found some friends and formed a little cell group. 3,000 lives. Do you realize what that means incrementally if each one had a child? Or two, as in my case? It boggles the mind again, doesn't it? Am I leaving something out here? My conscience and my memory. So how they picked me, I shall of course never know, because they got some of the lists from the police because we were all registered, you know. But other than that, it was really a matter of luck. And we discussed this at the reunion, you know, with this woman on day like herself, you know, the young teacher who was part of the group. None of them knew who the young man was who came to get me, but they were sure he belonged to the group at its very beginning. Then must have been caught or something, because nobody knew who he had been, and he wasn't there, you know. So, my life. How'd you like my teacher, Paul? Well, Joey's, wasn't he great? Yeah. That, what, 10 years ago now? Right, Parkinson's.
There's another question up there.
I was just going to say, you might tell them about the milk. I always thought that was interesting. How did that happen?
Yeah, I met this woman on the at the reunion. I've never seen her before, heard of her, right? And we both agreed she was not the one who was responsible for saving me. Because my usual said to you, and I said, no, I remember it was a guy and I can tell the difference, right? So she suggested that I go, what's really important? She suggested I go to the archives and look up the notebooks of the underground, you know, to be sure that I hadn't hidden by herself. And so that's where I met the archivist. When we did about Edmund, we saw the film, and she brought out those the 4 notebooks, and sure enough, I'm a hysterical character, because I'm in there. Number 896, as I remember, was my code number, which means I was number 896. Very simple codes and so forth, quite fantastic. That's when she came up to me and asked me whether I wanted to see my father's file. Just about costing my life. So I thought that was it. I thought it was what I thought that. This was so unexpected. You know what you saw? The rows and rows of files. They brought these back after the Nuremberg trial. Unbelievable. No microfiche, all the real records. Yes.
I was wondering, how was it for you to kind of sacrifice your Jewish identity for Catholic faith?
Could you say that again, please?
You're Jewish, and so when you went to this school that you went to, and you were saying in the movie that you had to practice Catholic faith, so I was wondering how was that?
I practice Catholicism, not necessarily faith.
Okay.
Because I was 10 years old, and a 10-year-old kid is a thinking kid. It's not just a little robot, you know. So I knew exactly what I was doing. Very respectful always toward it, and it wasn't necessarily playing a role, but it was being my other self, if you will. You know, I had a lot of years to think about this. And during the day, I was a little Belgian Catholic. And at night, when I cried myself to sleep, I was who I was, and wondering what would become of that one. I always had faith and optimism. I was sure I would see my parents again. Help me through. You know, really help me through. You like anecdotes? You say no, I have to stop. You know, when I was brand new there at the school, and every time somebody prayed, it was a language I'd never heard before, because it was all done in Latin, right? You know, everything was done in Latin. Well, I become Catholic overnight and didn't know the language. So I did a lot of mimicking and parroting without any idea for what, but God blessed me with a good ear. You know, and so I did that. And as the film said, within a week, Father Abdi, the priest whom you saw, who died shortly after the film, made me his altar boy. So then I really had to learn, because for 2 years, every morning I served Mass, you know. Those among you who are Catholics know what I'm talking about. The rest you can guess at it. But the first time in the church, you know, after I'd gotten there probably the following morning, the only thing that was in French was when the priest was saying things to the boys. Everything praying and so forth was in Latin, but then, you know, he was always explaining things too. Thank goodness. You know, when he holds up the host, you know, like the wafer, that's a problem. He said, this is the body of God. What does he do with it? He eats it. Right? Just then your old kids going, you know, oh my God. Well, Paul was in for a shock the first time he goes out to chalice. He said, this is the blood of God. I'm going to drink that. I went through some trauma. You know, and then he came down and I had to put God in my mouth. I have to swallow. And you understand, I'm saying this greatest respect. Okay? I'm not in any way trying to be disrespectful. No. These are wonderful people, the priest and the nun. Well, almost hopefully. The one who took care of the infirmary, she was a good soul. She never went anywhere without the monastery. If you looked at her cross-eyed, she took your temperature. Was not an oral of the So, am I speaking too much? Oh.
No. I wanted to mention that Paul has put his biography in an autobiography.
The pictures are fantastic.
He and Sharon brought some copies.
Jerry Seldon, I autograph them.
Okay. So if anybody would like to buy one. I think at this point we need to one here.
So after liberation, and you were reunited with your mother,
yes.
How long did it take before you found out about your father? And then how long after that did you decide to go to America? And who sponsored you in America?
I was liberated in 44. The war ended in 45. May of 45. My mother immediately went back to Antwerp to reapply for those papers that had been in the works when the war started and when the Americans left. So that's one real question. The waiting period was 3 years. So in 1948, the papers came through, and as I said earlier, we decided to take the papers and run with them. Who sponsored me? I don't want to tell you.
Really?
The local. My father had 4 sisters. You know, the film said, you can't remember everything, that both my grandfathers fell heroically for Austria in the First World War. As a matter of fact, they both died in 1914, the first year, leaving, you know, my grandmother's widows. And my father, who was 12 at the time, had to help his mother rear his 4 sisters. You know, all of a sudden he was a man, you know, quit school and go to work. So his sisters, of course, are older and vice versa. 2 of the sisters married and left. One went to what was then Palestine, and one came to America. The other 2 went up and sold for the rest of the family. By the way, the film said 15, it was 66. My father. But we only talk about him. And I know the exact number because I did all the research and turned all the papers into the Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. So the papers were sent to where we were sponsored by my aunt who had come to America. She had sponsored me. You know where they lived at the time? I love eggs.